Thank you guys, everybody, for coming, and very much appreciate this opportunity to have some answers and questions and community discourse. I think it's really important. So please feel free to grab one of these stools and make yourself comfortable. I think we should make it a goal to keep this at an hour at the most. The door is literally open if you ever want to come back and ask more questions. Also, if we reference some things tonight, some documents, public documents, or where can I look at that or look more into it? There's a pad here. You can put your name and phone number and the document you want. You know where to find it in your email.
Name and email. I'll send you whatever document or piece of code we reference if you want to check and read it for yourself.
My name's John Lewis. This is my partner, Shane Dunleavy. So I guess to preface this, very much appreciate you guys taking the time on a Friday night to do this, of all things. But this started with Blue. So Blue brought his friends over a week ago, and kind of showed up out of the blue on my front porch. Surprised me. Please don't do that. But Blue, raise your hand. Yeah. So, he basically showed up and said, would you mind talking to my friends? We've got lots of questions, and we just wondered what you thought about it. And, whether it was incorporation or it was growth or it was water or it was all these things that everyone has legitimate concerns about. And, where are you on this? We haven't seen you. We've seen the newspaper, we've seen Facebook, but you've been conspicuously quiet. And I have been, we all have been, because, I'm a big believer in basically just keep your head down and do your job. And there's no reason to be negative about anything. And the more and more things that come out that aren't true and eventually get figured out, that's fine. I don't care. But if things are coming out that aren't true and are leading people the wrong direction when they could have looked up a document and just saw it for themselves, that maybe would have been helpful with the election coming. And so I appreciated you guys coming over. And after a good hour and a half, I think we all kind of sat there and went, boy, I wish more people heard this. Right?
Absolutely.
And it was kind of like, I've heard that a lot, and I probably should, just stop and just say what we have to say and answer questions, and then you all can just make up your own mind. But at least you're informed as to what we, after 30 years of doing this, our opinion. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't, but it's like everybody else's voice, it's worthy of listening to and hearing. So this is a good opportunity to get that out, and I don't see this as a debate. I see this as you guys have lots of questions, and hopefully we have lots of answers. Maybe not, but we'll certainly try. And also let me also preface this from those of you who know me, have known I've lived here with my wonderful wife, and we've raised 4 beautiful kids over almost 30 years in this valley. And so my answers today, are biased. They are my own. They are based on 2 hats I wear. I wear one hat that is business, and I'm not apologizing for that. I'm in business. But there are better ways of doing business and worse ways. My other hat is the community, my family, and where I live. And that's a big difference when it comes to developers, let's say. I don't want to just pay them, but, we talked a lot of business, didn't we, Bo?
Absolutely.
In business, in banking, there's a big difference in interest rate between a primary home and a rental, And why is that? Because a second home, maybe you let that one go if you have to, and it's not as important. But man, when it's your home, you'll die for it. You'll fight for it. And that's the difference with where we're coming from. This is our home. I have to go meet people at the Valley Market. You can't be a big, huge developer from out of the area and still live here and raise kids and have a wife that has friends. And so, there is a difference between what we're trying to do locally here and what I think is next, what's waiting behind us, unfortunately. So we got done with our talk the other night, and I wasn't entirely happy with it. I mean, I'm not sure I'm here to give you a bunch of great blue skies.
Yeah.
But I hope we can bring some reality to what is going to happen to us and what is happening to us, and what maybe we can possibly do about it, and not just get run over by it.
Absolutely.
Maybe I'll start with kind of a vision of where are we going, because that gets to, should we incorporate? Should we slow down growth? Should we speed up growth? Should we do all that stuff? And again, I'm not going to use names because I don't think that's appropriate, and I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus. There's no need to do that. But so if I do, I apologize. Anyway, so the first thing I do is I look at that four-way intersection, and there's a wonderful family down by that four-way that looks at that four-way like they look at a child, and she's heartbroken that it has a stop sign now because she remembers when it didn't. And, God forbid there's a light there. And that will be my fault. I'm sure she'll think it's my fault. But, years ago, UDOT, and people just don't know how this works. But years ago, UDOT, already said you have too many people driving through there. You have to have a light. And the county's been putting it off because they're not sure if they want to do a roundabout or a light. And, in my mind, I'm thinking it's almost like a teenager where you're just sad that they're growing up and you don't want that light no matter what. But guess what? That light's coming, whether it's a roundabout or a light. And that kid is growing up with or without our consent. And that troubles me a lot. And my reaction to that light is my reaction to this entire valley. My reaction is, okay, I have to get over the fact that light is coming. That kid is growing up. Is there any way we can have an effect on that? Can we have a better kid? Can we have a kid who's got some guidance? Maybe we want a really fancy roundabout, or maybe we don't because that's not pedestrian friendly enough. But shouldn't we be talking about that? And I don't see the leadership. I see lots of negativity, but I don't see anybody going, yeah, we should have a round table about that. Let's talk, or let's go this or that. And I see when people try to do that they just get knocked down in Facebook. I mean, God forbid I stick my head up, I'm going to get it shot. And so in that kind of environment, it's hard to have good, solid progress. It's hard to know where we're going to go. And I don't look at this place very often today. I look at it 20 years from now, 30 years from now. And what are my grandkids going to think about this? And what am I going to say to them? How do I explain myself? Because a lot of it is going to have something to do with me, I hope. But I have to explain this to somebody. So it's important how it turns out. And if I don't do anything, if we don't do anything, then the same will happen. That's just how life is. And the same happening, when I look at that four-way, I see there's nothing wrong with these people, but I see a pirate ship. I see a log cabin. I see a modern dentist's office, and across the street, a stucco dentist's office. And I see a brand new brick bank that looks like it goes in Layton. And I see a log grocery store that's probably too small and needs to do something. And I see a cinder block storage unit in the middle of what could have been a beautiful little downtown. A downtown that wonderful lady at the four-way never wants to see, but that's coming. And we're going to have, just go stand there at that four-way and tell me you're proud of that. Tell me that your brothers and sisters who came to visit you are like, oh, that's the most charming little four-way I've ever seen. And personally, I'm tired of waiting for someone to come rescue this. And what we need is good planning, good leadership, good forethought, time put into where are we going to go with this. And frankly, I don't care what it looks like. I just want it to look cohesive. I want it to look like it's kind of, oh yeah, it's Old West, or it's all modern, or it's all log, or whatever. But hodgepodge, man, I can't get into that. It's not something I can be proud of. So how do we sketch around, and I'm just saying this about downtown Eden, let's say, whatever that means, but I mean the valley. How do we sketch a future that we can work towards and not just ignore or try to suppress? Because that's not going to work. And downtown Huntsville, great example. They did a pretty good job. It's cohesive. It feels like, and it's got its value because of it and everything else. But, how do you apply that look? And, the county is trying. Municipalities are pretty clumsy vehicles. Government is a lousy vehicle, right? I don't know what happened to the belief that government was, complicates things. But in my day, the joke was, I'm here from the government and I'm here to help, So having them try to stitch together a form-based code that says, if you're going to do it, make it look like this. I mean, it's a great attempt, but we haven't been doing it until recently. And I'm glad they're finally getting around to everybody should look generally like Old Eden or something, but, that's a good attempt. And whatever we do, we need to kind of build towards that. So, in 2014, the democratic process put together a whole bunch of people. We spent a couple of years up until 2014 or whatever the dates were, lots and lots of input. And we came up with a general plan in an attempt to okay, what are we going to do with ourselves? Because if we don't change, we went from everybody had one house per acre when I moved here 29 years ago. And at some point that changed to, they basically got into the science. The reason we went from 1 acre housing to 3 acres per house, the reason that density changed is because they started to get around to we really can't do that many septics. It will never work in this area. That's too many septics. If you took all the acreage divided by 1 so that's just not going to work. They should have right then started some kind of centralized sewer. That would have been the sensible thing to do. But the people who would have made that decision are looking at the electorate, and if they're not going to get voted in next year, then they're not going to do that sewer. And you look out there, and the joke here is this is the valley that infrastructure forgot, and it really is. And that's great, right? Until that septic from the junior high leaks into our aquifer and you're drinking it. Then it's like, oh, I guess we should have done something back before all the sidewalks. So, the goal would be to have all those people get together in 2014 and come up with some plan. And what we don't want to see is one rooftop over every 3 acres. They did, Charlie down at the county did a really interesting map. That one. So that's Charlie. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I call that the measles map. But that was Charlie going, okay, if there's a red dot, and it's not to scale, but if there's a red dot on every house on every 3 acres in the valley, that's what the valley looks like. And that's what really swayed a lot of people in that 2014 meeting or those series of meetings was, okay, we really don't want that. That's going to look terrible. Okay, well, what are we going to do about it? And every developer who shows up here once a week who wants to buy land and build, they're flabbergasted we even have a plan like this, that you have to move things around. You can't just create 100 things. And I get accused of that all the time of, something over here has suddenly 100 things and it shouldn't. But the key is, where did it come from? And did we clear it off of some land? And that became the whole crux of the 2014 general plan is, take every density point in this valley and see if you can cluster them into little villages so that these other places stayed open. I mean, it's a pretty genius plan. And what I very distinctly don't hear out there in the discourse today is a different plan. I hear complaining, but I don't hear a better plan. I'm all ears if somebody can come up with something better. But just stopping things isn't going to work. And okay, so let's put them into clusters. And that was my whole, and it's so ironic that my whole slogan was more park, less city. And I get so ridiculed for that. I'm like, look, it seems so clear to me that if you want more park, I'm not saying no city. I'm saying put the city in a village. And we already picked the 7 spots these villages were going to go. And the 4-way is a perfect example of where you put a village. And that's where you have higher density so that you don't have higher density over in Middle Fork, so that North Fork stays open, so that you put it in Nordic, you put it at Wolf Creek, you put it in Huntsville, you put it in, Liberty Rodeo area. And that works great for everybody except who lives next to that village, right? I mean, you guys are out in Liberty, right? So unless you're next door to the rodeo, park, you're gonna think putting all that density at Eden's a great idea. Yeah, and if you look very carefully at the people making the most noise today, unfortunately, they live right next to this village center, and I feel terrible for them. And before this ever started, I went and took each of them out in my truck and explained all this to them. It wasn't like I threw it on anybody, and we talked. I spent a lot of time taking, lots of people, even here, out years ago and saying, this is what I'm trying to do. And if you're gonna have villages, and if that's gonna work, and we're gonna pull that density off of things, because no one else is gonna do it, who's gonna do it? So we bought Legacy by you guys, 300 acres. And so 3 acres, 300 acres, we could have done 100 houses. We chose to do 48. Why? Because it looked better, because I'm proud of that. And Osprey is 600 acres. The guy we bought it from got it out of a foreclosure from another guy called Moose Mountain. I don't know if anybody here remembers that project, but that was on half of Osprey, and it was 200 houses, and it was approved by the Planning Commission. 200 fed by a septic houses, and that was half. So it was going to be 400 houses. So we bought, at our own ridiculous expense, 600 acres, and instead of doing 400 houses, we did 61. Okay, and that sweet lady down by the four-way looked me in the eye, and I'll paraphrase, but she's like, I'm so glad it's only 61, but darn you. I'm paraphrasing. And she was still mad there was anything. And I'm like, I get it. And I went to her house, and I was surrounded by, how many people were there? It was a huge family. And I'm like, look, I promise I'll do a good job. I'm going to put 50 acres in front of it. We're going to have trails that get you from the lake to the ski resort. We're going to do all these amazing things. Lots are going to be averaging 9 acres apiece. I mean, could you really ask for a better use of land than that? You could ask that nothing happens. True. But something's going to happen. And if it's not us, it's going to be that bonehead who wanted to do 400 things. And that's tragic. And, the other joke we have, and sorry, I'm talking too much. You're good. The other joke we have is we feel like we're like, what kind of developers do we call ourselves? It was like, not reactionary, but like
defensive.
Defensive developing. It's like we're going to go capture the land at the four-way so that no one else screws it up. Because, and again, no hard feelings with the other developers who have kind of just recently shown up, but if you look at their plans, and you've seen some of what we're doing, but not all, but it's a bunch of affordable housing and really small houses next to each other instead of a 10-plex. I mean, I would rather see a 10-plex than 10 tiny houses at the four-way. And you have your density in the middle, and then as it gets out, it gets smaller and smaller. But the other guy who comes in and just takes out that 10 acres is going to max it out, and he's going to take every density point he can, and he's going to leave, and that's it. And we're stuck with that. So, believe it or not, we'd like to buy a lot of that stuff and try to do it in a responsible way. And no one else is bringing sewer. We've now spent over $10 million bringing sewer all the way from Nordic all the way to Wolf Creek. And in 2 weeks, roughly, we're going to turn the thing on. And, no, nobody has to connect to it. No, nobody has to pay for it. It's not going to force anybody to do anything. No, nobody paid for it except us. We did get a grant from the feds for COVID relief infrastructure. Great. But aren't you glad you didn't pay for it? Do you want the bond floated by the county that you have to pay for? Because you didn't. And
let me just add one thing there. The reason we got a grant is because the system was oversized 10x beyond what we need. It was designed to pick up 2,000 homes. We only need 200. There was also an additional grant that was put into place that was going to run a line out to the junior high and pick up all of the major polluters, which included the junior high, the Maverick, and the assisted living. And we changed our design and put a manhole right in front of the Maverick, and the local water and sewer providers actually shot that one down. They thought it was more important to stop development than it was to protect their water sources. And this is the water provider that every spring gets complaints about brown water and odors, and they killed it. And the other district did not want to fight it, so they gave the county back their $2.5 million, and it's going to sit there. And it'll eventually get hooked up, but everyone's going to have to pay for it now. So it's a shame.
That's a good point. We did make this 10 times bigger than we needed to. We didn't even need to put a sewer in. We could have just done 61 septics. That's what they really tried hard to push us to do, because they didn't understand a big system. But we really wanted to connect it to Wolf Creek. I've never done septic. I don't ever want to do septic. I think it's a crime in this valley, but it would sure be a lot cheaper and easier. But we went the long route, and I thought the right route. And now there's a manhole if you go walk across the street from the Maverick. And that should have taken the sewer from the old folks home and from the junior high. And Maverick.
Where does the sewer end up going?
It goes to Wolf Creek, Wolf Creek's sewer plant, and then it gets reconditioned, and then the water goes on the golf course. So, that's what should be happening here, not septic. And it's a crime that the same people who live next door to our projects who complain, which I don't blame them for complaining, but they've now mobilized to try to get in, they're now president of the water company, and the water company is now going to say, you can't flush our water down the toilet. Now the sewer company doesn't want to fight it. And, and so that literally took $2.5 million that we could have all enjoyed and gave it back to the county. It was like, you're going to get us back the money? I mean, why isn't there a newspaper article about that?
I wonder.
Yeah. So, things like that drive me kind of nutty. But I guess the other point to make here is, did that stop anything? Did all this, is Eden Crossing stopped? No. Do we have a development agreement, a contract with the county? Yes. Does Incorporation change any of that for contracts that are signed? No. So, did we drill our own well, and a year from now we'll have, our water fixed, and off we go. And I guess the point is, developers and business people, they figure out what to do. And if you're not going to stop it, then maybe you should try to work with it and control it and get something out of it. When we did Eden Crossing is a great example. And I know that's a hot button, but it is the village core that the density that could have been on Osprey and those 600 things, or 200 things in our case, that's where it should go. So it's not on the hillside, because it sucks for the person who lives next door to it. I totally get it. But it's better for the rest of the valley who doesn't have to see it on the hillside. And that's what we voted on. And, the code and the plan was very articulate as to where this should grow. And if you look at it from 30,000 feet, yeah, it's at the four-way. And there was no question in our mind that we would get permission to do this village because it's on the books. You can't say no to that. And God bless the planning commissioners who are here tonight. I love them to death. But, that was a perfect opportunity to not just say no. No, because the valley's not ready for it isn't a valid answer in my mind. Having a discourse over, well, okay, we really probably can't say no. And I think I even heard the chair of the board of the planning commission say, or it was one of the other ones that said, well, why do we care? The commissioners are just going to say yes anyway. So they kind of gave up. And I was really disappointed they gave up because, one, why would the commissioners say yes? Because they legally have to, okay? But two, a good planning commission is there, not just to say no. They're there to say, okay, look, we realize you're probably within your rights. And if this is going to go like we probably think it's going to go, maybe we could get a sidewalk out of this. Maybe we could get a park. Maybe we could get a community center. Maybe we could get a roundabout. You big rich developers, we want X, Y, and Z. And we have a negotiation. And that's how the rest of the world works. And we say, okay, well, we really want it or we don't. And we work it out. And at the end, we have a deal or we don't have a development. And then it goes to the county commissioners. And in this case, it was just a flat no. And frankly, every day since it's been a no, even though other density things get approved even further out. But the problem is we ended up going to the county commissioners and they said, okay, well, it does actually meet the standards and property rights are property rights. And we have to approve this or, it's gonna be a long legal issue. And they did the right thing and they approved it, which pissed off everybody who lives right next door, and I get it. But, we were the ones who said, hey, how about we pay for the roundabout? That's a couple $1 million. We really want to see a good roundabout there. And we'll put a park in right here. And, you didn't make us do a community center, but we do have plans for one over here at this next project. You are not going to hear that from the next guy. The people who are buying the land next to us and the people who are trying to buy us out do not give a shit about this town. And you're not going to get the next guy who's going to say, yeah, I'll do it anyway. You didn't ask me for it. And, that's what you get with us after 30 years of living here. You have a trail that probably not one person here knows about or has ridden on that goes from the lake. It goes halfway to Nordic now. It's 4 miles long. And it's a bike trail 10 feet wide in asphalt. And the next phase we do connects it to the ski resort. And that's going to be fabulous. They didn't ask us to do it. We volunteered to do that. And it's because it looks beautiful. And every project has things like that you should do. How cool of a trail do we have at Legacy? That thing is 9 miles long and everyone's like, don't tell anybody. You spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a dang bike trail and it's beautiful. And
My dad loves it.
yeah. So,
Oh, wait, that's your dad?
yeah.
Now I get it.
There you go. Okay, so I'll try to wrap up my soapbox on that. So, there are things we could do better if we organized and if we kind of joined forces a little bit better. And if our discourse was a little bit less no and a little bit more, okay, if it's going to happen, how do we do this? And if you don't think growth is coming, please show me a town where it stopped. I don't know of one. I mean, go to Bozeman, go to McCall, go to any place that's beautiful and remote, and look how many people are there from New York, and look how many people they're coming. So how do we get ourselves ready for that and not just try to stop it? And that kind of leads to incorporation. The folks who are pushing incorporation, there's probably some in there that really think what they're doing is a good thing, and there's certainly good people behind it, no question. But there are a lot of people in there, in my opinion, and just my opinion, that this is not about responsible looking forward growth. This is about stopping growth. This is, I don't look at Facebook, but I certainly hear all about it. And it's all about how do we stop John? Okay, great, power to you. I hope you do, but because it'd be a lot easier if I didn't do all this. But I have development agreements. You can't break development agreements. So if someone's out there saying, well, if we do this incorporation, we can stop John Lewis, you can't. It's done. I already have my agreement. So I don't actually care if we incorporate or don't incorporate. If we do, actually my stuff gets through and no one else's, gets clogged up for 6 months. It's frankly great. Okay, but then I go put on my other hat and I go, okay, well, wait a minute, hang on. That's great for me business-wise, but what does it really mean? And I can tell you, I have spent 30 years putting together budgets of HOAs and businesses and companies. And, you can tell me all you want about the feasibility study and how this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, but you cannot convince me that you take a town as rural as our valley, an area as rural as our valley, that's twice as big as Ogden and 10 times less people, and you tell me that's going to cash flow? There's no way. There is absolutely, you have way too much road per front door. Just, hang on, let me get this out, now we're going to.
This is perfect to segue into what you're saying, so when you're ready, let me know.
Okay, so, just from a smell test, come on, there's no way. And if you spent hours and hours and hours going through the feasibility study like we have, a lot of things pop out at you. And I would just suggest you go back and really read that thing, because when it says this is based on what the county said the roads cost, if you bother to call the county and say, did you really say that's what the roads cost here? They say, yeah, we said that, but we don't actually keep track. That was our guess. Okay, but nobody will say that in the newspaper. And when you say, well, where did you get your examples? Did you go to Heber to look at what typical road costs are where it kind of snows and doesn't? And did you go to Morgan? Morgan would be a great example. Oh no, we actually took Far West and some other towns down and mixed the pot and okay, well did you figure in, there's a lot of categories they didn't figure in, but all of it, I mean, even if you just take all that as gospel, okay, all of it is based on growth. It doesn't work if it doesn't grow. And they've got, well, we didn't grow our costs, but we did grow our growth, our income. Okay, well, are you sure the people who want to do this are planning on growth? Because they seem like they want to stop everything. So if you do this and you don't grow, like Erda, and please go look up the town of Erda that just did this and collapsed, you find out that it only works if you have city centers and commercial and growth. And it all leads back to legislation. And it's a really amazing, horrible, mysterious process at the state legislature. And you'll notice that most of those people up there are builders and developers. They're not teachers in high school, I mean, there's business oriented and growth oriented. And they have way more ways of making cities do things they want than actually counties. It's much easier. All their laws, all their mandates are, pushing cities to do affordable housing. And just go Google the governor and listen to him for 5 minutes about growth. And if you don't think he's going to make this city do what he wants, you're wrong. He will. And they're going to mandate that we do stuff, that as a city we do stuff. So we're going to go broke and we're going to have to grow. And that doesn't sound like a very good combination to me either. And okay, so quit complaining. What should you do? In my mind, there was a chance not too long ago where we could have had, instead of 3 commissioners that maybe aren't such a great voice, because frankly, I think we should incorporate at some point because we need more of a voice. And maybe we need 5 commissioners or 7 commissioners, and maybe 3 have to live in the valley or something. Take it out of only a couple hands and put it into more hands. That's reasonable. But, I think our conclusion is incorporation is probably a good idea, but you're doing it for the wrong reasons and you're doing it the wrong way. And again, if you did it just at Eden, it probably would work, but you can't include Huntsville and South Fork and, Nordic, and that's just too much land. I mean, how many acres are we talking?
It's 66.6 square miles.
And does that make it the 4th biggest city in Utah?
No, when they shrunk it a little bit, it took us down. We're just out of the top 10, I think.
Okay. Do you really want to be in the top, top 11 size with 7,000 people? I mean, that is a huge tax bill or a bankruptcy, or let's go push growth to pay for it.
The one thing I want to add to that is I'm actually very much in favor of incorporation. And it's funny because both sides of this debate, pro or against, and we all want the same thing. We want to stay rural. But the risk this incorporation puts us under, to me, is intolerable. We're taking 66 square miles, lots of open space, and we're making it a city. And we're subjecting ourselves to state-down land use code. And no matter what the city decides, state-down land use code will take precedent. And if you look at one of our closest neighbors, Montana, you can see what they did. They are pushing housing as hard as they can because they are running out of it. Very similar to what we're running into. People are moving into the beautiful areas. They came up with 3 bills that, if they happened here, would devastate this valley. 1, any parcel within a city can be subdivided into a 1-acre lot. We just tripled our density if that goes through. 2, any city parcel can have a duplex on it, okay? We just went up another 2 times on our density. And 3, you can add an ADU to any city parcel without dealing with parking, garbage, infrastructure. You can just add it because they want more housing. Those are 3 state-down land use bills that passed. The exact same thing could happen in our legislation. And that's the risk that bothers me with going 67 square miles. Because I will tell you, every large developer has its eyes on this valley. Don't kid yourself. They come through our door. We hear their plans. Ivory, D.R. Horton. Every week. We've got guys from Seattle, guys from Vegas. They've got options on this 1,500 acres. They've got 3,000 units planned. We hear their ideas and we're like, I don't know where they're getting density, because we have a general plan. We have finite density. You can't just create it. You get to a city level, guess what? You can get density created. They just did it in Park City. They gave a developer 800 density points and he is developing. That is the problem I have with this incorporation. I love the idea of incorporating Eden, Nordic, Wolf Creek. It's great. You put all the density in one place, it supports itself, and then you annex in other areas as they grow, and you grow organically. That makes complete sense to me.
So ultimately, work together instead of against each other, because this is all your home in your whole valley, right?
Yeah, basically.
I think so.
I mean, I don't want to see giant growth. I don't want to see D.R. Horton coming in. And when D.R. Horton comes in, they get hold of their 3 or 4 or 500 acres. It then becomes economically feasible for them to go to the state legislature, change the legislation, build 3 or 4 or 5,000 units, put in water treatment, put in sewer treatment. All that becomes economically feasible. So it becomes very real to get these large-scale developers coming in. Anyway, my soapbox. I'll jump off.
Yeah. So we could go on, but I'm sure you have lots of questions. So why don't we start with some questions?
Well, I have a
Yeah,
question, a comment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're not full-time up here, but we've been here for 4 years and read the paper all the time, so we know all the machinations that are going on.
You know one side very well.
I know, yeah, I know it very well. I made a point to go to as many of these meetings, these community meetings as I could. I went to the one at the junior high school and they presented the feasibility study. And I'm a numbers person, I'm listening to all this and I just think it's smoke and mirrors. But I said, okay, I'll listen. I went to I don't know how many of you in here were at the meeting at Huntsville Library last week. Okay. They had a gentleman who is the mayor of a city that incorporated on the Wasatch Front.
Mill Creek.
Mill Creek.
That was it.
Okay, you were there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. So you know what I'm talking. I was the one who asked the question about sales tax revenue.
Yeah.
And I said to him, where is your revenue coming from? Now, mind you, they got 75,000 people in this city, right?
And
We've
how
got,
big are they?
huh?
13 square miles.
Yeah, 13 square miles.
So we're, again, just for smell
tenth of
test,
the
we're
size.
65.
60, almost 67.
We're 67 square
Mhm.
miles and only 7,000 people.
Right, 1/10
And
of
they're,
them.
how many square miles?
13.
13
Yeah.
and
75,000.
75.
So they got 10 times the population, basically.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, okay, where's the majority of your revenue coming from? He said, sales tax. I said, what percentage? He said, 70%. I said, okay, of that 70%, what's the biggest driver of your income? Oh, we have a Walmart superstore. We have many, we have multiple
Car dealership.
well, that's coming, but yeah, but multiple large tax-based businesses that are feeding money into them, right? We've got a Maverick and we've got a small grocery store. And I'm saying to myself, and I don't know if anybody in that room was connecting the dots. Where's the revenue coming from? If 70% of your operating revenue is coming from sales tax, there's nothing here driving sales tax. Unless I'm blind, tell me what it is. And then the feasibility study, I remember this distinctly. Somebody asked, or the question came up, what's the sales tax coming out of Eden or the valley that's being sent over the hill into the county? They said, well, we don't know. They won't give us that number. So they estimated that. So they don't even know what our sales tax contribution is to Weber. I'm thinking to myself, how can you be making a decision like this to incorporate with all the costs and everything that's involved and have no clue where your revenue is coming from?
I've never seen an additional layer of government be more efficient. It's always, one more administrative person to hire, one more salary. There's, it's not like we get rid of the county. We still have all the county stuff, but now we just have to hire the sheriff who was coming in before and so on. So, okay. You guys asked me a really important question on the doorstep the other day about water. And I think water is a big misunderstanding out there. Where are we going to get the water for all this? And that's a really valid question. And we think about that a lot. A lot of people don't, but we do. And, there was a great, I think it was 2017, 2019. And again, ask us for it and we'll send it to you, or you can look it up. But there was a great hydrology report on the valley. And, we actually called the lady who did the report, and she did a great study. It's a really well-respected study. And if you just read the newspaper, all you're going to hear is, no new wells. We shouldn't do any more new wells. Has anybody heard that? They already said we should never do more wells, right? So please look at that document and read the paragraph they're referencing, because it doesn't say that. It very specifically says, if you're gonna fix the bigger issue, which they really should be thinking about, how do we get water for the whole valley, not the next project? If you wanna fix it, the most efficient way is to do a water treatment facility and just take the South Fork and buy the shares in it and treat that water and then distribute it around. That's the least expensive per head, way to do water. It didn't say don't do wells. It just said instead of wells, you should do that. But when that got misunderstood and broadcast out that we should stop doing wells, and then when we got our wells approved, everyone's like, "Well, that's not fair. What happened there? They must have done something." It's because that's not what the state engineer said. And when you go talk to Weber Basin or the engineers, they're like, "No." They even came out and gave a talk about how that's not what we meant, but no one remembers that. And so they're not saying no new wells. They're saying if you're going to fix this for the entire place, do it with a treatment facility, which is a good idea. But
Just to clarify a couple points there, 'cause I mixed a few things in.
Yeah.
The valley-wide study was done in 2019. That was done by the USGS. Lucy Jordan was the hydrologist, and she no longer works there, but she lives in Park City. She'll tell you about it, and she laughs about this valley in particular because she says it's the valley that cries wolf, and it is one of the healthiest aquifer basins in the state. It's the one she worries about the least. So that was that study. The other study he's referring to with the groundwater is Bowen Collins. And the context of that study, so everyone understands, is they looked at a global municipal solution for the entire valley. They were looking at a solution that provided 13,400 and something acre feet of water. And they said groundwater is not an option for that because it will interfere with too many other water users. In specific, it's Ogden City because 98% of our water goes to Ogden City.
That's what I was gonna ask. I was like, when all the snow melts up here, why do I have a whole stream going through my backyard? And when you know what I mean? Like how?
think about what he just said, because I don't think anybody understands that.
Yeah.
98% of the water in this valley leaves and goes to Ogden
Correct.
because they got here first and claimed the water. But when we go do a small well and everyone screams, "Oh my gosh, look how many acre feet that is," compared to their millions they take out a day, holy cow.
Yeah, they
How do you
maximize.
solve that issue? I mean,
You
that's
can't. They have the historic water rights, so we have to work around it. But there could be agreements made with Ogden City, and they have been approached before. The county has approached Ogden City with ideas of giving us 3,000 acre feet of water to do a municipal system. There are deals and negotiations that could take place, but they own the water rights. They are the historic water rights.
They're most of the commission. I mean, I think that's people's issue with the commission is they feel like there is no representation here.
That they're not focusing on the valley.
Two-thirds of the commission is based in Ogden. They're looking after Ogden. They're not looking after the people up here. I think that's the concern.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a valid concern. I mean, the waters has nothing to do with where they live. That's just because in 1890, the people in Ogden put the water rights up here. Why they don't fight it, maybe that gets to, well, if you lived up here, you'd maybe want to fight it more. I get that. So,
Because they're getting voted in by the people in Ogden. Why would they do anything for the people in the valley?
yeah.
Well, it's a little different because it's Ogden City, not Weber County.
But Ogden
It
City
controls
is what
its
percentage
water
of
rights.
Weber County.
Yeah.
No, well, it is, but this is all unincorporated.
No, I understand.
Their
I'm
voting
saying
base
what
isn't in Ogden.
Weber,
No,
the
they
county
are,
commissioners.
they vote for the commissioners. The entire county votes for the commissioners.
Correct.
So we're only 3% of the population. They'll always win. In restructuring by districts, you can't have 3 districts only up here because
That's why you
they have
gotta
to
work
be
with them.
equal. They have to
Set
be
them against-
equal population, so we can't get better representation
Yeah,
through redistricting, sadly.
right. I don't disagree. I think we need more of a voice.
Yeah.
How do we get it?
Yeah, how do we get it?
Well,
That's the question.
Smaller corporations is the only thing I've heard is a possibility. But how do we get your vision? Because John, we share your vision. How do we get that vision to work now? Because it hasn't worked so far, right? We've got all those issues you talked about. And we've had a 3 commission basis for a long time.
Right. Well, I personally see it starting to work, and that's why everyone's getting upset because all of a sudden transfers of density are happening and projects are starting, and so it's it's too bad it took this long to get started, but it is starting. But, you know, the first thing I would do is I would push for 5 or 7 members of the, you know, instead of 3 people trying to make all the decisions, make it 5 or 7 or whatever. And well, we had a vote on that a couple years ago. I don't know how long ago, but they did vote on it, and people voted it down for some reason. But you know,
Is a Weber County vote, is it?
yeah.
Tried and failed.
You know, and maybe it's something where we'll see where this incorporation goes. But you know, that would be one thing I'd like to put my muscle into is maybe I can, I don't know, not barter, but.
Could we barter better as an incorporated?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you go to them and say, look, I mean, it's too late now, but we'll stop this incorporation, but we want 7 members on your thing, or make a deal, or, you know, politics is a very strange thing. But we should be putting, whatever happens after this, if it's not incorporated, we should be putting our effort into making their board a better version of our voice. And in my mind, it's 7 people and 3 have to come from the valley.
You
Which-
can't do that legally.
Yeah, I have a question with that.
Sure.
And maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way, but what keeps going through my mind is, as small as our voice is supposedly, we actually have 1 commissioner right now. 1/3 is 3% of the
Right.
vote, but 1/3. And maybe that's not the commissioner that's making the decisions that we want. Maybe that's not the commissioner that we wish we had. Whatever. And I'm not saying that's my opinion. I'm just hypothetically.
Sure.
But be that as it may, just because you have 3, I mean, I don't know how to increase that, right? Percentual wise, it's about as high as it's going to be, and it's apparently not making anybody happy, or very many people happy. So I don't know that angle is the solution itself either.
Yeah, or maybe get a, you know, 2 commissioners from the valley if you can, and you know I think you have a lot of apathy on the other side of the hill too. So I'm not so sure that this valley couldn't get something like that done if it put its time into that. And maybe if this doesn't work, that's one solution. But or go back and do incorporation, but make it half as big. Just, you know, make it more sensible as far as how you do it. And I would be, like we said, we'd be for that. But I don't want to do something that's set up to fail. It's kind of like doing a neighborhood, another retreat where the budget is just not even possibly going to work. But maybe if we cut out trying to do snowplow on everybody's sidewalk, and if we do this, and this, you know, I can see a version of that working. But currently the way it's done, and you know, HOAs are as good as the people who run them, right? And you get cuckoos in there sometimes who are retired and have nothing else to do, and they screw everything up. And then there's the hardworking people in the middle who, you know, make sense and are, you know, if they ran it, great, I would be all for it. But it never seems to be that group. It's always the, you know, I don't know, it doesn't seem to be the.
Don't insult our HOA people.
I
It's
know.
going great, John.
I mean, we've had this
Things are going really well.
We've had this exact conversation lots of times. And you guys would be great. But it's not you guys who end up, you know, it's the newspaper lady who ends up running things. And now everything's going to go back to 6 acres a house. And
Well, there is a risk. There is a risk there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
when we have new leadership, you're gonna have some people, you don't want the people you're just talking about. You don't want an anti-growth
right.
coalition.
Because
You
it
don't
doesn't
want.
work. Everybody knows there's got to be.
Yeah, so, but, you know, what we have isn't really working, it hasn't worked. Maybe you're saying it's on the precipice of starting to work?
I see it working, but it's hard to tell when people are kind of lying about it. Like, well, Eden Crossing stopped and that won't work. When it's going, it's going to work. So, but it's certainly taken too long to get to here. There's no question. But then, you know, cities do things slowly, or areas. Sorry, go ahead, Kate.
Could you see a future, let's say incorporation goes through,
Uh,
could you see a future where that's beneficial to your vision for the valley? And let's put aside the financials, because there are expert financial people who say it will work. So
Yeah.
put it to one side. How do you see yourself working with the incorporated entity if it is
Well,
successful?
You know,
And could it be better?
regimes come and go, you know, and we'll just work with the new group like we worked with the last group. I've survived in this business in this valley for 30 years because I work well with groups. So I'm sure we'll figure it out. And I hope, you know, sometimes we have crazy commissions. We have, you know, sometimes we don't. And they come and they go and they come and they go. And a lot of times the sensibility works itself back in because it just doesn't work when it's crazy. So, you know, we'll make the best of it and we'll try to do what we can to help. But, you know, I don't see a lot of discourse out there about growth of yeah, we're gonna need these things. We need Eden Crossing. I haven't heard one person say we
Because you're
want.
just reading the paper.
Yeah. No,
I mean, it's a lot more people than
Yeah.
you're experiencing,
And I think-
you know.
Well, I hope that's the
all kinds of
case. I
different
sincerely do.
Yeah.
I think most people.
It's not one side or the other, as Blue says, it's all sorts of people in between
Yeah.
Right.
thinking different ways.
Well, and it's that group in between that I'm hoping to talk to tonight. You know, I hope this, you know, we're taping it. I hope it gets to those people and they can make their own decisions. And honestly, it's good either way for us. I just don't personally think it's going to work, but it's not my choice. And if it goes, it goes. And then we're going to get behind that and try to make it work, just like we would anything in our own neighborhood. But, you know, I hope that we can continue to talk these things out and not just throw accusations out there and so-and-so has a sewer going through my land and grandma died because of it. And, you know, that kind of stuff just A, isn't true, and B, isn't productive. And we have a big job ahead of us. And I know the people in this room understand that, but I hope others do because it's a gorgeous valley and we care. And I know you care. And, you know, Kay and I can agree to disagree on some things and we agree on most things. And everybody wants a better future for this valley. So we're here, we're prepared to do what we can and continue to do, you know, the best we can for it. But I don't know. We love the place too.
No, we know.
Yeah.
One of the
We're all
things
just trying to figure this out too, John.
Sure.
It's not
Yeah.
an anti-John thing or anything.
I know.
Obviously.
We all know John, come on, bro, I'm like, I would.
Don't look at the signs.
Yeah.
You know, keep those out of your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
I did just want to bring up that we are 100% transparent, that there is nothing you can't ask. If you have a question, feel free to drop in this office and ask us. If you want to talk about water, you want to talk about sewer, you want to talk about density, you want to talk about government relations.
Or John and Shane at wolfcreekresort.com. We're not hard to find.
Yeah,
And
we're happy to answer any question. There, you know, we don't really have anything secret because everything we do is public record, so you can look it all up. I know people like to say we have some back room, smoke-filled,
we get our money from the mafia. don't
whatever.
forget that.
Yeah, we get
I love
a
that.
mafia connection apparently, so yeah, please feel free anytime. Yes.
John knows that I've been in and out of the valley for almost 20 years. Always need my scorecard when I come because I'm never quite sure what's going on because I'm from the East Coast and I'm not here very much, but I love the valley. Don't want to stop having my footprint in the valley. But I guess, John, this question is for you. I love numbers. I'm getting older, which is great, but from the least timeline to the longest timeline, what are you seeing? Like, will this be done in 10 years? Will I be waving to you from the ashes when you're done this? Like, what do you see?
Oh, man. Well, first of all, whatever I think I see, I'm sure I'm wrong.
Okay.
You know? Yeah,
And I'm not
yeah.
trying to pinpoint you, but
No, I mean, I can give you my guess.
I'm trying to, visualize, because
Yeah.
in my mind, the growth has been fairly slow. And yes, it looks different every time I come. But when I come over Trappers Loop and I know I'm coming over here, I still get the same feeling and I identify landmarks and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm here. So,
My answer isn't necessarily a good answer, but I can tell you what I truly believe. Okay, I when I take off my family hat and I put on my business hat, I look at life. I look at this valley in terms of economics, of supply and demand. And again, that's maybe contrary to this hat sometimes, but life unfortunately comes down to supply and demand. So if Utah's experiencing a supply shortage of housing, then prices go up, right? And if people are pandemically moving out of big areas into remote areas like we saw happen, and I mean, that was a sea change. That was a complete paradigm change. And, that is gonna drive cost, or that's gonna drive pricing. And so that big, movement of people out of cities and into places like this, just go look at the last 50 people who bought something from us and look at where they're from and why they left and how they now can still Zoom into office but stay here. And look at the way our rentals have gone from, we bought the house and we rent it out once in a while, and we show up here for 2 weeks, to you guys coming out and spending the whole month. And then we're gonna go back, or 2 months. And all of that has transformed, and I don't see it switching backwards much. It'll move a little bit back. People will go back to New York a little bit, but if 10% of all those millions of people decide this is where they'd rather be, which I can't imagine why they wouldn't, then they're gonna come. And the irony of all this anti-growth is if you slow down that supply, it raises the price.
Yeah.
And you guys asked me, like, what about this? And I'm like, look, I hate to tell you this, but your house in 4 years is gonna double. That's what I see.
Well, I wasn't even thinking of prices, I was just thinking.
Well, I'm just gonna tell you, I'm not sure that's a good thing. I mean, it's good for you guys, but we're also all going, okay, what do our kids do? Where do we go? Because at some point we get kicked out because it gets so crazy. I mean, you've seen just in the bridges, we went from 400 to 800 to 1.2 and up and up and up. And the houses didn't change that much in size, did they? So what is driving that? And is that going to change? What's driving that was the pandemic and the people wanting to come here. And there'll be a recession coming at some point, like there always is. And there'll be a slackening of demand. But what happens if demand goes down a little bit and supply stays low? You still have high prices. You still have sales. So when someone says, like you guys, hey, are we gonna see sales slow down? I don't think so. Why? Because there's just no supply. And they're trying to slow even that down. And that's what is the pressure at the government level, at the governor's level, is you guys have no supply and we need to make it more affordable. So when the newspaper says, stop growth, and it's too bad we can't afford things, they're actually contradicting each other, and that's an ironic thing. But so I'm sure there will always be forces at bay that slow down growth. It won't stop it. It's never stopped it. But from time to time, you have moratoriums, you have, infrastructure catching up, and that is going to create higher prices in this valley as we go forward, because there's 4 houses on the market this week, and there's 10 people from New York trying to buy it, and they're going to fight over it. And the guy from Layton can't compete with that anymore. Or the person in Liberty can't compete with that anymore. And, to me, that's pretty sad. That's not great news. So can we build more things here and try to alleviate that? Yes. But, so you look forward 10 years from now, and this place is really unaffordable. And I can't really have much to do with that. I can't affect that as much. But what I can have an effect on, which is worthy of working on, is how do I make it look good? How can I be proud of whatever it does become, however we learn to live with it and afford it? Is it open? Are there parks? Are there trails connecting bikes from this park to that park? Did we do that? Because that we can have an effect on. And, some of that is a lack of leadership and a lack of voice. And it always is. And it's always incumbent on us to change that. And maybe it's incorporation, maybe it's not incorporation, but fix what we have now. It ought to be efficient, whatever we do. And it ought to be driven by people who are intelligent and civil and care. And I'm optimistic. I'm an optimistic person. So I think at the end of the day, those good people win. And we end up in a beautiful place that we have a hard time affording. That's where I think we're going.
Hey Patty, just to give you a couple of numbers, you said you like numbers.
I do.
So right now the projection, right now we have 2.8 million people living on the Wasatch Front and back. That is projected to go to 5 million by it's 20 years. In 2 decades, that's projected to be 5 million. So that's the growth that the state is trying to address. And that's one of the reasons that we have remained such a growth center. We're not really affected like the rest of the country, where if real estate prices are dropping, people are still coming here, they're not leaving, and our birth rate is very high, so we're growing really rapidly. As far as what we are doing, how fast that's going to happen, I know a lot of people see us get projects approved and they instantly go to, all of that's gonna be there tomorrow. And it's not, it's going, I mean, we won't build out what we're going to do before I retire in 3 years. We did.
Don't leave.
Yeah, I mean, we did, I don't know, 25, 30 homes this year. Next year, we might do 40, 45. It's not, we're not going to suddenly flood the market with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes. That's not what we're gonna do.
So it's pretty much what I've been.
Similar growth, yeah. I mean, it'll kick up a little. We currently can't meet our demand.
Janet,
We have more demand than we have supply, that's for sure.
Thank you for those numbers.
We've got a question from Janet.
He was just answering it actually. My question was, you guys have, I don't know, a little south maybe of 1,000 homes approved.
Yeah.
What's your timeline on building it?
Yeah.
That was my question.
20 years.
10, 20
The
years.
rest of our lives.
Yeah.
So, but
And I hope it's 20, I don't know.
I imagine there'll be more projects as well. I mean, like,
Doing
Actually,
more folks, that's
yeah.
it.
Sorry,
what was that?
I'm not letting him do any more.
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
We're done. We have one more project that's conceptual that no one's heard about, and it's an affordable living. I know that's a strange word, but it's something, an affordable living model that would be aimed just at Valley residents or Valley descendants. And it's something we've discussed with the governor's kind of chief of housing guy. That's just a little pet project that we can roll out at some point in the future when it makes sense.
It'd be nice if we had housing that
Yeah.
only locals could buy.
Yeah,
You know,
and that's
no
that's a
solutions like
40
that.
unit project at some point.
Right.
But otherwise, we're not looking to acquire more lands and everything.
So you were saying maybe 40 homes a year, basically?
Well, no, I was saying it will increase. I mean, kind of increase a little bit each year as demand and growth happens, but it won't be just suddenly we're flooding with 200-300 homes at once. It'll be, this year we were 35, next year maybe we're 45 or 50. Year after that, it might be 60, 65. I mean, it'll happen organically. It's not, we're not looking to maximize everything all at once. It's not like Eden Crossing is suddenly gonna be the max out. And honestly, I mean, what I've read in social media is just absolutely insane about Eden Crossing. The development agreement maxes the density there at 350, but we're not even gonna do 350 things. I mean, we're probably gonna do about half of that. That's it.
We're gonna bring a lot of the concepts and stuff a little later about Eden Crossing when the time comes. And just so you guys know ahead of time, if you picture, I really like the look of Old Eden with the blacksmith building and the brick and the black, and that's gorgeous. And our concepts are gonna look a lot like that. They might be in the front just like it, and then one set of the buildings back, 2-story versions of that with glass and kind of a urban version of it, but brick and black and metal and glass. And then you go back and maybe that's a little bit more modern, but it's all tied together and it feels like it's the same feel. That's important to us, but we're still going round and round with ideas, and somehow these different roundarounds get leaked on the internet, and we're going to do 1,000 chimneys or teepees or God knows what. But there'll be a day when we, like we always do with our projects, invite people in and what do you think of this? But I can tell you, our current thinking is it looks a lot like the old Eden, just updated versus something completely new. So
How do you think's the best way we can prevent these other developers who don't care about the valley, don't live in the valley,
Right.
don't give a shit about the valley, I think you said.
yeah, sorry.
How do we prevent, what's the best mode?
Yeah.
When the state is like right on.
Right.
And commissioners are probably whatever the state says.
Well,
What's the best way to
especially if you
stay down?
incorporate.
Yes,
what's the
one
best
thing
way,
that-
what can we do besides make more commissioners?
One thing that really worries me, and the thing about us that nobody believes, and fine, don't believe it, but we've never been interested in creating density. And, if you really go back and look at my planning commission meetings that I used to do, I was the one guy saying, no bonus density for developers, we don't need it. Never, ever, ever, ever give a developer extra density. And that's really foreign to the people who show up at our door every week. They're like, what do you mean? You just go ask for 100 and they give it to you because they want the taxes. And we're like, well, That may be how it works out there, and I don't work out there, so I don't know, but I really wanna stick to the general plan, which is that the density is set in concrete, and it will never go higher than that. Let's just move it around to where it's the most comfortable for everybody with villages. And that's what I get most worried about changing. And, how do we prevent that? Because that's what we hear D.R. Horton coming in here literally and saying we're gonna do.
Yeah, they literally laughed when we showed them the general plan. He was like, "Oh, that is so cute."
Right.
I mean, that's
But
really what he
how do
said.
we stick to the general plan? I guess is my question. What solution is there in your mind? Besides, the only thing I've heard is when Shane said maybe a smaller area we could do that. But
Yeah.
maybe
Defensive
also
development.
areas that are out of control.
Told you lots about what we're worried about. What do we do about it is a much more valid question.
Janice,
I'm listening.
Yeah. Personally, I think remaining unincorporated is our best chance.
I mean, I'll
Because state down land use code is aimed specifically at municipalities. It is aimed at cities and not at unincorporated county.
Right.
It's very specific that way, and it even says, a city of this size, a township of this size. I mean, it is specific, and it
Currently leaving
excludes
big
unincorporated.
Yeah.
So,
So do you think that affordability requirements don't get implemented here? Because my understanding is the county is responsible for having affordability plans and implementation in their unincorporated areas, because that's the only land they control.
but it's a little different with the county. And the nice thing about the county is you can shift it. So,
Where?
you can shift it down to the, it doesn't have to be the exact, how am I gonna say this?
Yeah, it could be over on the other side of the hill where it's more possible to do because the land's cheaper. Up in the resort area, it's kind of hard to do affordable anything. But
There is more flexibility with the county level, and yes, I do think they're going to implement it. They've talked to us about it, and I'm sure the next project we do, they're going to ask for 5 or 10 deed restricted affordable housing.
Well, and we're trying to do it ourselves.
Yeah, it's not the worst thing.
No, nothing wrong with it at all.
We already asked that of all the big developments.
Right.
We did of Nordic and everybody
Right.
else, they have to
Right.
give a certain percentage
Right.
of
Exactly.
affordable housing. It doesn't have to be built, but you have to give it in money or
I
whatever.
guess the difference is that's you guys looking forward and being responsible about it. When you're a city, they just make you do it. And you don't have any control over, is it 10% or 20% or 5% or?
But we could control where it goes.
As long as it's within your city,
It's within your city,
yes.
Big city.
But what was discussed at, at the planning commission meeting, which is all public record, but was, the proposal that's at the 4-way, which is still on the table, and is listed on your website. The planning commission said, look, we're all about, we can have affordable housing in the valley. We don't think it belongs at the 4-way. The center of our downtown of our city, I don't know that that's where that goes. Maybe it goes somewhere else. It goes in the,
Is this the cowboy project you're talking about?
yes.
Yeah.
Only because that's the only one I know about at the moment. I'm sure there are plenty coming down the pipe.
Well, just, what you end up with is kind of boutique developers in a place like this where they specialize in that and they know the ropes and they know how to get the cheaper money because it is that. And, they have formulas and those particular guys have 20% at least has to be affordable or they can't get this kind of grant or that. And you're right. It's like, okay, that's a great product, but don't put it right there. Put it on the other side of Eden Crossing or even further out or in South Fork or wherever. And they'll say, well, I can't do that without sewer. And then you're like, okay, well, should have put a trunk line over to something and get them out of the way, And it just keeps leading back to we should have years and years ago been thinking about this and being smart about it instead of waiting for somebody to just pay for it and do it themselves. But now it's started and we can get going. But I don't know. I don't have any silver bullets for you, but it certainly needs to be addressed. And all I see is just a lot of nonsense out there.
I think Paul had a question.
Yeah, I just, this has been sort of a double pronged discussion, meeting, soapboxes. One is your vision and, we've known each other for a while. We've been through a few phases of up and downs in terms of business here. And you, John, in particular, have withstood you've passed the test of time here. And I applaud you for that. And I think that we all have a very similar vision. I came here on the other prong, trying to get a little more clarity on incorporation or not.
Right.
And the numbers, there's one, I like the concept of a smell test, just doesn't smell right. The numbers say another thing. I don't think I'm personally gonna rectify that.
Yeah.
But the vision that everyone has, and you have actually executed plans. I haven't even seen a concept of a plan from Incorporation in terms of how this is all, when the rubber hits the road, how is this gonna work?
Yeah.
Not just conceptually, but how are we going to actually implement and execute this? Because you have apparently maintained the fidelity to a high degree of the general plan. And I want to keep that going. So I'm still confused as to whether Incorporation will help maintain the fidelity of that, or it will open up the door for a hellscape.
Yeah.
And that is a concern of mine, and I don't know how to vote. So I would like you to shed some light on that.
Shed some light.
Well, I'll just, one quick comment, it's a risk. If we decide and people decide to incorporate, they are taking a leap of faith and it is a risk. And there's risk associated with it. We don't know, and we won't know until, the government is elected, they develop their plans. So
That seems like a very conservative statement, Shane. It seems like if we become incorporated and the state has a greater ability to implement a plan independent of our general plan,
Right.
that is a dangerous piece.
that is a risk. Like I said, there is risk with it, and that's one of the risks that I can't tolerate.
And what I wish I heard, and maybe it's out there, and I've gotten so confused, that there is an actual plan with the incorporation to mitigate that hellscape. Besides no growth, which we realize is not enough.
Yeah, it kind of comes down to my opening statement, honestly, that, I think incorporation could be a good thing, but in its current configuration, it's a disaster. And I know others don't share that opinion, but you can't make this work on that much land and that few people, period.
It's very alluring because it sounds good, but it may work bad the way where we are right now.
The fact that it wouldn't, they rushed to get this in, I think it was 8 days before the code changed. 9 days. And the reason it was rushed in is because it wouldn't work under today's code, because you have to have more tolerances and it has to make enough money to have a buffer, and it's too risky if you don't. And so the fact that it won't work if you just turn around and do it again, that worries me, And now it's not to say we shouldn't go back and try to redraw the boundaries and try to make a solution out of this. I still think that we need one. I just don't think we're doing it right this time, and I'm not convinced we're doing it for the reasons that we need to be doing this. We're doing it to just stop growth. That's the only reason this is happening.
I don't.
Kay and Janet have.
You go. Okay. I was up in town a lot last year, and in that time, all I had to know about the valley was Facebook, and I definitely only heard the stop growth and the whatever people, and they were very loud, and I thought that was the incorporation effort. And I thought that until I came back to the valley and I started asking around, and I found out that is a separate subgroup and whatever, that they're two different groups. And when I started talking to people, trying to get more understanding, nobody outside of a few of those people, basically I call them the Eden Crossing people, because that's kind of when they came about.
Right.
Outside of them, I've never heard anybody talk about incorporation for stopping growth. It was all about being able to protect and do exactly what you were saying, like lead and guide the valley but at 100% focus. Whereas with the county, just by the fact that there are all the cities and townships and other unincorporated areas, we can't get them to focus on the valley. We have asked multiple times from the planning commission, hey, can we close this loophole that's in this ordinance? Can we, every time it comes up, we have to put in all these conditions because it's open on the ordinance side. And they'll tell us, we just redid West Weber, so we're not gonna open up anything more for like maybe 3 years. Well, in 3 years, a lot's gonna come through.
Right.
And from what I understand, and again, I'm just piecing it from going to all the meetings and I'm reading all this stuff, I believe what I've heard is that there's some weird state thing that if this doesn't pass, you can't even try for incorporation for like another decade or something like that.
It's not a decade. No, I think it's like 18 months.
Oh, it's longer.
Oh, I heard it was like 10 years, and then of course it's like a 4-year process or something. Anyway,
It's not.
by then, especially the way you're saying, like all these developers are already eyeing the valley. They're already knocking on your door and the commissioner's door and the governor's door and everybody else's. In 10 years, our valley's done.
That's why unity instead of opposition, all you guys come together.
It's not us guys, though.
It's
You can hear that there's a certain representation that's not at this meeting. That's the anti-growth committee.
I think
And they're not even
They're
here.
a small
But I think
number.
they're a very small number.
It's a very small number. It's a vocal minority.
I think you'll hear that we agree with the messaging of incorporation. That's the thing. We do agree with it. It's just the risk this is putting us under is what we don't agree with.
The problem with trying to take the faith
We're on
in
the
this,
same-
the faith that you're asking me to have, that there's actually a whole other group that it's gonna work out because they don't feel that way, and it's just the crazies over at Eden Crossing, don't worry about them. Problem is, our experience is, they're the ones who got themselves elected to Eden Water, and Eden Water shuts down the sewer, and now $2.5 million just disappeared. And, went back to the county.
I hear you.
So,
And
what happens when those people get involved and in charge? And,
They're not gonna be in charge.
well,
you put you guys in charge, I'm all in.
What I'm saying is you don't know, and I'm sure that they will run. And that's just what I said to Laura when I talked to her was, if it passes, it's incumbent on all of us to not only put forth good candidates, but to back them and campaign for them, because you will get some of the crazier people running as well. And so it's gonna be a lot of hard work if it passes.
I just see
even
their
know.
group is very organized and very passionate, and I see a lot of other people who are very apathetic.
And they have the newspaper behind them.
Yeah,
Well,
and
so-
it's hard to get the
And our community not everybody knows that that's the case.
Okay, who has the newspaper behind them?
The crazies.
We
The
don't even mention
crazies,
names.
yeah, this is where there's a whole broader population of what I've seen.
And then I was nervous about the meeting last night,
In
like if you put a charter in
incorporation.
place, then that's another layer of government.
But you have to vote on it. It has to be passed by a majority of the public. And I actually think that a charter could be a great way to protect against the crazies. This goes into last night's meeting, and that's fine, we're not gonna get into that.
It's
But
2 years down the
there
road.
are ways that we could protect it and it doesn't happen if none of this passes. But when you're saying, and I do think that we all agree on pretty much all this, we've always had the same vision of the valley and everything else. But in terms of protecting it, I know that there's a leap of faith. You guys just said that. But we already know what we currently have. We know what the status quo is. And if enough people are not happy with it, the only other option is a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And then a whole lot of hard work to make sure that it turns out well. That's the way I see that.
For all of us to come forward and show our dedication to the valley. And there are a lot more people who want to work together as a whole valley to enact that vision, to preserve farms, to follow the code, and to update the general plan, which it's 10 years old now. It's a world of difference now, and the county says they can't do it. The county commissioner's been begging to do it, or the planning commission has been begging to do it, and they get stiff-armed and can't. But
Well, it's just, in my mind, it comes down to, how do we do something that's twice as big as Ogden with only 7,000 people? How do we make this vision come true if we're bankrupt?
But the 7,000 we already said
bankruptcy
is
is not an
growing.
issue.
It is growing.
why is it not an issue?
It's not gonna stay 7,000.
Can I speak to the financial issue? The people who did the Incorporation feasibility study were selected by the state. They've done bunches of these. They have a track record. And when there's anecdotal information, if you may have called someone who didn't know the cost per road, there's a cost per road. The county published it in an article a few years ago. They updated it. So they gave the best information they have to that LRB group. If the county doesn't know their cost per road, then we are in deep trouble, or their cost per mile. But in terms of feasibility, there are lots of sources of other funding that are available to the city that the feasibility study couldn't consider. And if you get into the world of city organizations and lobbying, there are federal levels equal to some more than, the COVID funding that was available. There's more money out there at a federal, state level. In terms of the taxes, because I was bothered by that, although I do my share of ordering online, we do get point of sale taxes here. We get online taxes here. But then that's only half of our sales tax we get. We get a share of the statewide tax that is shared. So it's not just the Maverick sales, it's broader. And then in terms of the roads, it's not just our property tax money paying for the roads. The state has Class B and C funds that pay for the roads. There are other federal grants. And that calculation was all analyzed in the study, in the LRB study. And then when another economic expert organization worked at it, who was retained by the opponents to Incorporation, essentially they validated that the feasibility study was correct. It has soft spots if we have no growth or very low growth. And welcome to a depression or recession. We'll all be in trouble then. But with John's, you've got growth on the books. The vast majority of people interested in Incorporation or who live in the valley know it's not realistic to say no growth. It ain't gonna happen. So, it's feasible. It's financial. It's just, how do we want to work together to enact the vision?
Yeah.
As for me, I'd rather have us be a whole community, a whole valley, given it is financially feasible, than have little Swiss cheese governance groups who don't have a consistent approach to what the valley looks like, who are more easy pickings for the next developer to come in. We're stronger as a whole valley. And I'm looking forward to, frankly, if this thing passes, these guys being really involved in helping to work toward the vision we share. Yeah, because John, we've had a nice experience thanks to you for many years in the valley.
And thank you, Kay. Let's do this because it's late and everyone's tired. But there's no question that the good news is that everybody here wants the best for the future of this valley, right? And we're all going to have to make up our mind whether we think it's feasible or not to do Incorporation, and whether it passes or not. We're committed to getting behind whatever happens, and we'll do our best to get to that vision, which I don't think is all that in contest. I think most people kind of want some theme to what we're doing and not just hodgepodge and all those things. We share way more things in common than we don't. So with that, again, thank you so much for coming tonight. And again, if there's more questions or more discussions, we're here. And
take cookies, please.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and cheese. Everybody needs some macaroni and cheese or grilled cheese.
Sure, yeah.
I really want to leave here with
I know.
a little more clarity. Let's assume everything is feasible, that we vote in the best people with leadership, we're incorporated, does it still expose us to Governor Cox mandating something politically
Yes.
that
100%.
it doesn't matter who's in charge?
100%.
Okay.
And
that's whether it's incorporated or not.
No. Cities get pushed down by the government.
Okay, see,
not
that's all I
counties.
want to know. Thank you.
I would suggest looking, if you want, I can send you the Montana codes and
I
read
do
them.
think that'll change.
I
Very
just,